You want to set mine up now? Like 2 minutes or a minute or right now?
We're gonna have some intros first by
Okay.
Holly for the chamber, and
Then she can hook it up?
Yeah.
Do it.
Let me know when you're ready.
Well, the font's so damn small, I can't read any of it.
It's a really interesting presentation.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait. Which is about normal.
All of our technical issues are resolved at this point. Thank you all for coming. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I see a few new faces in the room. Thank you guys for coming. It sounds like the word that we are doing some in-person lunches is spreading. I, again, am Holly Reeder. I'm the vice president of our local chamber board currently. I am also the general manager at the Aspen Suites Hotel here. I don't see any of our elected officials in the room today. I have a couple other chamber members here. Looks like we have Lauren Olson again on our chamber board, and Noah Rogers is also on our chamber board. A couple announcements. Tourism Task Force is still seeking some input for the tourism best management practices guidelines that they have. Deadline for feedback is today. I know Rachel's been sending out the link in her announcements. If you need a copy to that, I believe it's on the city's website, or reach out to the chamber. I'm sure the staff is happy to get you that link if you want to go through the guidelines and submit your feedback. Our Sitka's Emerging Leaders, our next monthly meetup is going to be held November 16th from 5 to 7. So if you know anybody, if you have anybody in your organization ages 21 to 40, it's a great community, great group of people. Encourage them to come and join us. Last announcement, Sitka Chamber's third annual Light Up Lincoln Street will be held Saturday, December 2nd. That takes place down at the tree at Totem Square. Sponsorships for the event are open to help us make it bigger and brighter than ever. Also encouraging downtown businesses to have sales, have something. It is a shop local Sitka event to get people downtown shopping in our stores, keeping that money local. Next is our introduction of our speaker today. The real reason we're here, because we don't like to hear. I don't need to stand up here forever, guys. Gary White, the Executive Director of Sitka Economic Development Association, or SEDA. SEDA is a nonprofit economic development organization dedicated to enhancing the quality of life in Sitka through the promotion of a positive business climate and the creation of family wage jobs. Gary has worked at SEDA for the past 15 years. Prior to his work there, Gary worked as a commercial banker in Southeast Alaska. Gary enjoys spending time in the outdoors and hanging out with his dogs, so pretty much everybody who lives here. For those of us joining on Zoom, you can submit your questions in the Q&A, and we'll relay those towards the end of the presentation. So with that, Gary White.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, you may have to stop the PowerPoint for whatever reason.
Sorry, guys.
No, it doesn't typically do that, but it doesn't like to run both at the same time. Here we go.
Shall I tell a joke in the meantime?
Please fill time, Gary.
Okay, this is an old joke.
You're up.
What did the left eye say to the right eye? Between me and you, something smells.
But I'm bummed.
That never gets old. Well, hi. Yeah, as I said, my name is Gary White. I run the Sitka Economic Development Association here in Sitka, and I'm going to go over. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We have an 11-member board. It's just myself and another half-time person. And as the intro said, we're trying to develop a good economy here, but also we work with the city and borough to manage the Gary Paxton Industrial Park, and we also are the marketing arm for Sitka's bulk water assets. Our mission is to foster a conducive and receptive business climate for existing and new businesses, create family wage jobs, and of course enhance the quality of life of all Sitkans. That's weird. Okay, I guess I'll look over here. So when we talk about quality of life, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about energy, housing, transportation, be able to get on and off the island, having a good educational system so our kids can take care of us, and public safety and healthcare, of course. Let me see if I can get back to my presentation here. Okay. Am I going here? No.
Sorry, everything worked during our test.
I have an Excel. Let's try this. Working? Yeah. Okay. So, economic development is the deliberate effort to, this is weird. I can't see it on the screen here, so it's going to look like this. To improve the economy in a specific area. This specific area here is obviously Sitka or Baranof Island. We want to do an efficient and effective use of all of our natural resources. We want to leverage our natural resources to help create a good economy. And one of the things is change is inevitable. Everything changes, but progress is optional. And we're not going forward again here. How about this? There we go. So what CETA works on here is basically this bottom part here is the economic foundations. I like to call it setting the table. And what we're looking at is making sure we have a good business climate, make sure we have the infrastructure, the technology, and the people to create all this stuff, and how do we bring it together and make a baseline so other businesses can work off of that and create jobs and bring revenue into our community. And so I always like to think of it as a bucket economy. If we think about all the money in town and it fits into a bucket, our money is always leaving, because this computer, all the clothes I have on, everything, every time we buy something, our money leaves town, right? But every time we sell a fish or a tourist walks up here and drops off some money, that's new money coming into the bucket, and it's always keeping us healthy. And so we have our prime industries, which is fishing, tourism, even, government, the trooper salary, things like that, healthcare, all the money that comes in through that. And then of course we have our transfer payments, which is Medicaid, Medicare, our investments, our Social Security, all that is new money that's coming in, and how do we keep that? The fuller we can get that bucket, the more we can do to improve the quality of life of Sitkans. We can have better amenities here. So what CETA's strategy is to try to figure out how we can bring more money into our economy. We want to support the groups that are providing high wage jobs. High wages, local activity, high residential employment, and year round. We also want to support the seasonal people, because, as I'm going to show here later, that the tourism industry brings in a lot of money to our community. And then we want to capture the leakage. We want to figure out how we can shop local, how we can, one of the projects we're doing here is trying to build a haul out here. It's trying to stop the money from going to Wrangell and Puget Sound, how we can keep that here and employ folks to work on boats and keep all those dollars that are leaving. It's all about keeping dollars and moving them around. So a couple of our priorities here. CETA held a strategic planning session in April. That was the first one I ever ran. That was pretty wild. Strategic Planning for Dummies is a really good book. Works well. So, one of the main resources we have is obviously our ocean. We work off it for our tourism. We work off it for our fishing industry. So we want to enhance that, the maritime sector. We want to look at other natural resources and how we can leverage them. We got our water. We have mining opportunities here, and especially with everybody moving to electric vehicles, those all take rare earth minerals, and we have the ability to do that. We also have some really good gold deposits around here. So those are all options that we can take a resource and bring more money into town. Workforce housing, we're going to talk about that a little bit. You know, the strategy that I have is higher density concepts and more land available, supply and demand. We want to develop our essential infrastructure. That's our roads, ferries, docks, airports, everything that allows commerce to happen. Of course, we want to make sure that our kids are trained here. One of the great parts about UAS here is the fact that we can figure out programming that's needed in town and provide that training here so our kids can stay here and continue to live here. I'm going to show you a slide that our senior population has grown substantially, and how do we take care of our elders, but how do we also create jobs to do so in the same time? And of course, we've got our other enterprises. We've got healthcare, we've got construction, we've got other enterprises, military that are bringing dollars into our community that we want to support them as well. So I'm going to get into a little bit of economic data here, and then we can move on to some housing topics and talk about some of our key industries. So as you can see, our population is declining. We lost 8% over 30 years. We've lost, what, 7% in the last 10 years? And so what is that indicative of? We live in a very beautiful place. Everybody loves living here, but so why are people leaving? And I'm going to suggest it's cost of living and housing costs. And as I talked about the population, as you can see, which is crazy that the state came out with a forecast in 2012 that said we were going to increase, the senior population was going to increase by 35%. They got it pretty close, 34%. And so if we look at this, we can see that our senior population is growing, our working class people are leaving, and so are the kids. So what is that indicative? Also looking at, this isn't the slide, but I'm going to show later on that our unemployment rate's only 3%. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing people leaving because I would suggest that there's jobs available, but what's causing our population to get older and our working class people to leave? Here's the 3% slide. And so as you can see, our labor force, it's pretty darn steady. Obviously, we took a dip in 2020. The good news is we're above 2019 numbers. And this is just people that fill out a W-9 or I'm sorry, a W-2. This does not include self-employment people, which is our fishing fleet. It does not include military people, which I think there's 248 of those folks right now in town. And this is also a kind of an interesting thing is we look at what percentage of our workforce is non-resident. Was that 43% of people that work here do not live here, and that touches off to the seasonal side of our economy. You've got all the people that are working in the plants that are coming up in the summertime, all of the summer folks that are coming up to support the visitor industry, and we have a higher percentage of that than other places in the state. So that obviously puts a big draw on our housing when we have 43% of our people that don't live here, and then now we've got to provide lodging and housing for them in a few months. What does that do to our housing baseline? I just threw this in here because it's interesting to see how we're bouncing back after COVID. You can see that our scenic and sightseeing is down about 33% still, but some of the other ones are catching up. Our eating and drinking establishments are above 19 job levels now. Seafood processing, construction. Sure, that construction is probably related to the search expansion. So we are bouncing back in our jobs. Now wages, this is, you can see that we're below the state. And so we've got 55,900 is about the average wages here. Now, since we're talking about housing, one of the numbers they throw out there is that 30% of your wages should go towards housing. So if you take 30% of that, you're just under $1,400 a month that people should be using for housing. And we're going to just keep that in your mind as we keep going forward. This is also a big effect on the cost of living here. Our inflation is the highest since the 80s. When you look at that, everybody sees the price of fuel when they fill up their vehicles. Well, you also have to realize that the price of fuel is also affecting all of our groceries, all of our consumables, all of our construction supplies, everything that's coming up from down south on a barge. They're also feeling that, which is being passed on to us, which is also creating a cost of living issue here. But I was talking to Lauren beforehand, it's happening everywhere. Now, how does that, is it more here versus somewhere else? I'm probably going to argue that it is because we're in the middle of really nowhere. and whereas stuff can move on the interstate system a little bit easier. And so this is just up here to reinforce the thing. I mean, obviously seafood's cyclic. We've got good years, bad years. Last year was a terrible year for the seafood industry. I don't believe it's on this slide, but we had the State of the Economy presentation from Melani Shivens with Raincoast Data at Southeast Conference here last month, and they're projecting that the fishing industry lost about 60% of their revenue from the year before. So that's pretty tough. But as you can see, the peak amount is in the summertime, and once again, focusing on housing, that's putting a demand on the housing that potentially the supply is not there. Same thing with our tourism numbers. You can see that we were pretty baseline here, and now we've got this huge jump. And that huge jump happened right now. And how does the community deal with that huge jump? I mean, obviously, it's good for our community. If you take that 557,000 passengers, and let's assume they all spend $100 while they're in town, which is about right. That's just under $56 million that's coming into our community this summer. Take 6% on that, it's like just over $3.3 million that the city and borough is getting in tax revenue. That's then going to help support quality of life, get us other amenities and whatnot. But the downside is, how do we as a community absorb that within our traffic patterns, our housing patterns, everything else? And so this is a challenge that we're playing catch up, right? Instead of this linear growth, we went boom, and our growth didn't keep up with it. So at some point, that's got to, I'm sure it's going to even out, but that's, I think, one of the reasons why we're having a housing issue right now. It's been a very prevalent topic, and there's a lot of grumbling about the transportation and the number of tourists and everything else, but I think it's all going to resolve moving forward. But there's benefits, and of course there's issues that need to be addressed. Other key industries, we've got search with their expansion. That's also providing an issue with housing. They're tackling it by putting a number of units up there, and hopefully we can keep going. And then we've got the Coast Guard here. Yeah, it was 248 employees right now, but we've also got a proposed Coast Guard expansion coming on too. So how do we have the housing for that? So it's just all that we're seeing what's happening and how do we put it forward. I know Amy at the city's got some plans to move forward and try to get some housing stock online. I know BHA's got some plans to put some housing stock online. So I think there's efforts that are being made to do so, but how do we catch up to it? Okay, I'm going to talk about some housing data here. To be blunt, the housing data sucks here because we're not a big enough sample size, and it's hard for, like for instance, the U.S. Census Bureau, the American Community Survey is a 5-year rolling average versus the census that comes out every 10 years. That's a snapshot in time. So the last snapshot was 2020 in April. That's not a very good snapshot of our community because our housing issues are in July, right? They're not in April. Nobody's here. So it's hard to make decisions and get data off of that, especially when they're not looking at all that. Same with the AHFC and then the MLS. How many people know homes that people are selling that never make it to the MLS? Because so a lot of that data is really hard to get as well. And then short-term rentals, there's only 2 good sources to get data from. And so we're also missing a lot of that, and how much isn't even being advertised. It's just word of mouth through lodges and stuff like that. So it's really hard to gather really good data to understand our housing situation. But we're going to try to do it. So this is interesting. This is from American Community Survey data. How many people believe in 2021 that there was a 17% vacancy rate in town? Absolutely not. There is no way there was a vacancy rate. Even if you take the 3% plus or minus, there's no way there's a 14% vacancy rate in July. So it's really hard I've worked with the Coast Guard in the past on housing issues, and they have to use this published data to make their decisions. And I'm like, the data's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. But you can't make decisions in the federal government off of anecdotal information. It has to be factual based data, and we have a hard time getting a good data set here. Now the owner occupied, I believe that a little bit more because folks are here 12 months out of the year, right? And it looks like the good news is more people are buying houses and wanting to stay here, so that's a good sign of health in our community. And so, some of those vacancy rates, if you look at this, now remember this is in April. Yeah, there's a lot of seasonal vacancy rates in April. Same with for rent. But you can see that our housing stock's gone down because our for sale and our sold not occupied have been dropping, which means people have bought their houses. There's just less stock in the market, which also is indicative of a supply and demand issue. And I have no idea what the other vacancy thing is, but I'm going to skip that. And this is another issue that's putting demand on it, is our short-term rentals have increased substantially over the year. You can see that the blue line is first quarter, so we don't have the second quarter yet, but you can see how more and more short-term rentals are coming on, and what that's doing is it's pulling away from our local residential housing stock and our seasonal housing stock, but our seasonal workforce housing, not our seasonal tourism housing. So this is all about supply and demand again, and it's removing some of that supply. So remember when I said that the average wage, or after 55,900, 30% of that's just under 14,000. Well, you can see we're at what are we? We're in blue, so we're pretty close. It would suggest off of this data that most of our people are doing all right, right? Well, if we go and look at this slide here, this is how crazy the data is. Owners, there's 22% plus or minus another 10% are saying that they're cost burden. You go to the rentals, 49 with a plus or minus 21%. That could mean as many as 70% of our renters are having issues making their rent. That's an issue. Or it could be whatever 28. I mean, how do you make decisions between? It's either 28% or 70%. It's just it's hard to make those decisions. But I think most of us anecdotally we all know people that are having trouble making their rent. I mean, I think everybody is having issues here, and that there's not a lot of vacant rentals, which is a supply and demand issue. And this is just some of the new building permits that have come out. Obviously, you can see 20, 21, and 22. I'm going to attribute that to search more than likely, which is good. This is trying to help out some of the issues here, and hopefully those can continue to go up, and we can start adding supply back as our growth happens. And I am moving pretty fast, but I'm going to keep going. So I couldn't not talk about the Gary Paxton Industrial Park, since that's part of the stuff that CETA does here. I want to highlight this new dock that went in 2018. This dock right here has been great for the park and for the community. We've got commercial fishing groups that come out there and they transfer their gear off nicely. We've got guys that are working on boat projects where they tie up and they're redoing everything they can do on their boat above the water line, which means they don't have to pay for an expensive haul out. They can get a lot of work done there. And then we've started bringing more of those smaller cruise ships online. Next year I'll tell you, we're up to 25 ships coming in. There's been a little bit of user conflicts, but they all provide benefit to our community, but we also have to be raising revenue or earning revenues so we can pay for replacing this dock, paying for managing this dock. And so the cruise industry provides a really good revenue source. So does the commercial fishing group, but we're all going to have to learn to share this dock, which I think is a cool deal that we're starting to have a lot of usage out there, because when we were building it, I had the naysayers saying, no one's going to use it. You're just going to have a guy playing Frisbee with his dog on it. And that's totally not true. It's becoming an asset for the park, and it's being an asset of what the goal of this park is to turn this into basically a port to support anything maritime here in Sitka. So some of the stuff is, I just talked about the dock. I'm going to talk about the haul out here in a second. I just talked about that port facility of having this thing be a port for Sitka. This is an old slide saying we're going to market the remaining lots. We are out of lots. We need every single lot that we have almost to support the marine haul out. Bulk water, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. The bottling plant. The bottling plant's now been leased and is transitioning into a marine services support basically a group's got it now that wants to be working on boats or doing welding. I actually just had my skiff welded on out there. So it's a good deal, and it's providing jobs, and I can see this all coming together to be a really good revenue generator for the community and support. So we can support our fleets so those boats don't have to go to Wrangell, Puget Sound, and spend all their money there. They can spend it here, and we can start creating jobs. And as the last thing says, the dock and the haul out is going to dictate the future of the park. So yeah, here's another one of the dock. It's 250 feet long, 74 feet wide. It's concrete. It's built really skookum. We can move a 40-foot van of frozen fish across it, no problem. So if barges wanted to come in out there, we can put a 400-foot barge there. We can put up to a 400-foot cruise ship out there. And we've got the little float behind, so people can. We've had tourist groups running off of that. We've had other boats that are just doing a quick turnaround, loading a four-wheeler or something on their boat. So, yeah, it's a good asset, and we're going to continue to grow it going forward. Water, as you can see, I started in 2008, and when I started, there was 36 groups that were looking at purchasing bulk water, and I can tell you a lot of them were full of it. And so they were fly-by-night people that were wasting my time. So we started monetizing it, saying that if you want a bulk water contract, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth's at, and you're going to have to pre-buy some water or pay for the right of it. And so the result over the years is we earned about $1.4 million off of that, which is great, because I'm going to show you where that money's going here in a second here to continue to support the haul out. So here's the park now. As you can see, we've got private property. We've got Silver Bay up here. We've got co-partner Star West. This is where the bottling plant used to be, and now that's where the Marine Services Group's going. We've got insert over here. I love this story. Is we got guys growing fish over here and harvesting them over here. We've got lots that are dedicated to supporting the water department. We've got a secondary water treatment facility out there, and we've got a UV plant. But everything here in blue, these colors all here are going to be used for the haul out. And this one here where it says Northline Seafoods, it's actually changed to SIAC, and that's the one that's been in the news that the city and borough is trying to purchase. That's going to be very important, because I'll show you that on the next slide. So this is the conceptual design, and staying on that topic, here's that SIAC building. It's right stinking in the middle of the whole development thing. So I think it's a very good idea for the city and borough to buy that back. I was as shocked as everybody else on the price of it, but it is what it is. It's going to be a good asset for the park. It allows the city and borough to control their own destiny and provide a much needed infrastructure for the haul out. And so what the plan is we're going to go over here and we're going to put a pier out, and we're gonna build it so it's 150 ton here, which is going to service most of the fleet. But we've also heard from the fleet that anything over that can't be hauled in. There's a lot of bigger seiners, and there's some tender boats here that actually, frankly, spend more money while they're in port than the smaller ones, and we want to be able to track those guys. So when our marine service folks come in, they can get a really big payday over here that will allow them to stay here and work, while also being able to come down and work on some of those smaller projects, right? A guy's not going to be able to make it on smaller projects by himself. He's going to have to grow it. And so the goal is we're going to do this in phases. We're going to do it in a number of phases, but phase one is to do the 150 ton here, but we're going to build it strong enough so we can expand it into a 300 in the future, right? And then the boats are going to come in, and we're going to do this part of the development first. This is the second part of the development. So we'll be able to get boats out, we'll be able to get washed, we'll be able to get them set into a yard, and guys can start working. And then as we get more cash, we can expand to get our yard bigger, and we can start putting in a 300 ton lift. There's other things we can do. This building will be a nice, very good building to provide restrooms and an office space, and potentially marine supply group to do consumables. I've heard from a lot of guys that they don't want to be working out there, and then, shoot, I need a zinc and I need five quarts of oil. Well, instead of driving all the way back in town, you just go into your shop here and grab it. So I see a lot of really good benefits of this, helping diversify our economy, keeping money in town, and providing a lot of high quality jobs. You know, most of you know that, was it 21? Yeah, it was 20. No, it was 22 when we had the vote, right? Yeah, for the 8.2 million came from the sale of the hospital. So we took an asset that was a generator for us, and we turned it into this other asset, and then we took the bulk water money, and we're using that mainly to buy that SIAC building. So we're using the cash that we have in town to continue to grow this thing and develop it and turn it into, hopefully, a really good quality economic generator for our community, which I think it will. And that is all I have. So I'll take any questions anybody has.
I've got a question for you, Gary. As we look at Sitka's attractiveness to economic development and private business investment, how do you feel that the haul out will affect expansion and new businesses coming to Sitka?
Oh, I think, as I just said, I think it's going to bring in. And the thing is like, we can support our own fleet, but how much of that, how much of the fleet, especially if we move to a 300 in the future, how many of those boats that are fishing out west that port in Puget Sound, and they're coming by and they're like, man, it's so much more fuel to keep going all the way to Seattle. I can duck in here to Sitka, which is on the outside, and get my work done here. Or maybe I just come in and give it here, and then I'll find port here, which could help benefit our harbor system, and then they just jump on a plane and go home. So they don't have to go all the way home. And I think as this thing's going to grow more than we think it's going to grow. At least that's the hope. I mean, Wrangell went from really having a really tough time with their economy because they lost the same pulp mills we lost. They didn't have the healthcare really that we have here, and so their economy wasn't very diversified. They didn't have the tourism. They have the fishing, but they're not right on the grounds like we are. And so by putting in that haul out, it transformed that community. And I have a lot of friends in Wrangell, and we tease each other because they're like, don't do it because we don't want you to take the boats back from them. But I think the goal is not to compete against Wrangell. It's not to compete against Juneau or Petersburg. It's to compete against Puget Sound and bring those boats here and leave them here instead of having them transfer back and forth.
So maybe another question to that, how do you balance that economic growth with the impacts that it will have maybe with housing needs in the market?
That's the whole question we're having right here, is trying to figure out how we can get more supply online as we're building an economy, and we're seeing growth in the tourism, we're seeing growth in healthcare, the government, and now this marine service sector. It's all that much more important that we can continue to put supply online to help that out. Go ahead, Elliot.
Yeah, Gary, thank you for your excellent presentation. I suppose, I don't know how far you want to go into the weeds about the marine services, but as a citizen, my question relates to the new haul out, which is, what's the planned size of the boatyard, and how can people who live here and work here and have boats here feel confident that we'll have an opportunity to not just get our boat pulled out, but have a spot in the boatyard to work on it once it's out of the water? Or is that, obviously there's, an effort to have people come into the boatyard from other communities the same way that's worked in Wrangell, but I'm just worried about having the haul out here, but not being able to have my boat hauled here because there's not enough room for me in the yard.
That's an interesting question. So part of that question is also, how is it going to be managed? And that has yet to be determined. That's what I'm doing this afternoon, is I'm working on some analysis. I've talked to Wrangell. Wrangell's a city-run yard, and it's ran as a city-run yard because it's public money, and therefore their thought is that the public, meaning the city and borough of Sitka or the city and borough of Wrangell, needs to manage that for all that reasons, that local people, that there's no good old boy system that these guys get in and these guys don't, right?
Right.
there's another model out of Kodiak, which is working for Kodiak, where they have a private group that comes in and manages it, but the city council or assembly, whatever in Kodiak, they set the rates, and then they get a kickback of the sales, which is a very interesting model. And I know a lot of folks want us to go in that model. I just don't know if it's going to be feasible. For instance, the rate here before McGraw shut down was $18 a foot to get hauled. Juneau is the highest one in Southeast at $25. Kodiak, $68 a foot. Now, is our fleet going to want to pay $68 a feet? I don't think so. And so it's going to be figuring out, and that's why I'm spending a lot of time on this analysis to figure out, is it even feasible for us to go out and do that? Is it even feasible for us to charge $18 and have this thing cash flow? The past revenue models I've ran off of that suggest that it's not. And so this is going to be a community discussion of, is the community going to subsidize this for the benefits that it brings, or are we going to make this thing cash flow like a traditional business would? And then are those rates going to be able to withstand other rates within Southeast Alaska? So, but the goal is to obviously maximize the yard, obviously maximize as many boats that we can get out, and do it in a cost structure that doesn't cost the taxpayers and doesn't leverage the fleet too much. And so that's going to be a little tricky dance there to figure that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary. Wondering, kind of looping back to housing, what your ideas would be for like making sure that new development is affordable for regular people, and then also remains affordable into the future, such that, say, a home that retails first for $200,000 isn't retailing for $450,000 in 10 years. Like what the long-term sustainability of a housing market looks like in Sitka.
You know, I don't know how to manage the free market system other than supply and demand. I think the person sitting next to you has a better handle on it, Amy, with the city and the planning director. I know she's spent educational time learning about it and is working on plans, and so I trust her path forward. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I was part of the startup for the land trust, and that's an interesting concept going forward too. There's all kinds of different. You can do it through zoning. You could do it through. Yeah, there's if the city wants to put out their own developments, they can set their own lot sizes. They can set that. But once it's built, how do you stop a free market society? There's all this stuff that's affecting our housing market now, including, you know, the growth in population, not the growth in population, but the growth in tourism, and everything else that's affecting it. So I don't know how that magic answer.
Actually, speaking of seasonality in jobs, based on the number of non-resident employees that we're seeing, are we able to backtrack into a summer population for Sitka?
I'm not following you.
So your slide noted that only 57% of jobs in Sitka are held by Sitka residents.
Right.
Right, and then the other, what does that leave?
43.
43% are held by non-residents, whether that's in-state or not. Has there been any effort to sort of backtrack into a number of what Sitka's summer population is?
There hasn't been, but
Yeah.
there should be. I agree with you, because and I think I think I'm following where you're going, because some of that's being addressed now. Like you have some of the larger tour operators that are putting up their own housing.
Right.
You've got so that's happening. You've got the seafood plants that are doing the same, and I think a lot of that you might consider it. Well, you guys are already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what something is going to have to happen is the free market group's going to have to, hey, instead of I can't afford to pay $1,400 a month to put my summer employees in there. I can put up my own housing. It could be bunk housing. It could be all kinds of stuff. And I think that's happening now. But how do we address that to help it to help that move forward?
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear in so many presentations that Sitka's population is declining without the caveat of, our permanent year-round
Right.
residential base is declining, but that's clearly not the case at all times during the year. And so what is our peak population? And how do we then, plan amenities, services, infrastructure for those peak numbers, but in a way that we're not then supporting that peak demand all year round when we don't need to. So,
Right.
yeah, I'd be curious to hear if anyone kind of digs into the numbers more about what we're looking at more for peak population.
Yeah, I think, that's all really relevant, and I think that could also be a zoning thing as we go forward. This chunk of properties coming online is gonna be zoned for this type of activity, where it is for those bunkhouse types of things, and we can develop that and make sure that it's a mixed-use neighborhood, so those folks can have amenities and everything else. I think there's a lot of solutions. It's just, everybody's working towards it. I know you're working towards it. I'm trying to work towards it. The chamber's trying to work for it. Search is working towards it.
So I think that, those of us who've lived here for decades definitely have the perception that the seasonal population is larger than it used to be. And going back to what Gary was talking about, leakage, I mean, you think about the fact that when somebody is able to actually live in the city, their ability or their contribution economically to the city and to the city and borough's coffers is much larger than somebody that flies in, works for 2 months and flies away. Search, by the nature of our business, our employees, most of them, and we strive to have most of them, living here all the time. And like other businesses, because of this difficulty, we're building housing, but that housing isn't at this point in time, it's not part of the market. It's just sort of it's internally reinforcing our business, and other businesses who have the capability to do that economically will probably choose to do that because the going is so tough. But I think, though, as a city and a community, it's a head scratcher, and it's sort of a head scratcher for Alaska, because we have lots of people who come seasonally to the state and use infrastructure. They use the harbors, they use the sidewalks, they use all of the things that we as citizens pay for, and then but they're kind of coming through, and it seems like there's a lot more of them coming through these days than there used to be. But it would be great to be able to understand those numbers.
And all that affects even volunteers. Like, you got your firefighters, your EMT guys, your folks that just want to show up and help. As you have less year-round employees, that's harder to find those people to do that stuff. And I think that's all important. That's part of the quality of life of why we live here. All right, any more questions?
I guess,
Yes.
so you touched on our unemployment rate being fairly low. What does that look like as far as job vacancies, though? So obviously we have people working, but then how many people are still looking for people to work? Do you have any figures on that?
Can I ask Fran that question?
So I will tell you that economic trends last month said there were 2 jobs for everybody collecting unemployment right now. So I think I have posted what we call internal jobs, 177, and I want to tell you darn near 80 of those are search jobs. So, and then of course there are the jobs I don't have.
And
They get posted.
those are the ones we're asking for.
Yeah, so, and those are just the ones that I pick up, and that doesn't count what is actually really out there of employers who may not want to use our services or they're choosing a different outlet for advertising. So everybody in here could have a second job if they wanted one. I'm pretty sure that there's enough out there for everybody. But our employers are desperate. They're literally begging.
But people are working.
But people are working. Everybody who really wants to have a job has a job.
So then on the flip side, how's that look for the haul out and this expansion? I am one of those employers looking for people. I've been there a lot. I do talk to Fran often. But just like search, just like anybody in town, probably any business has a vacancy that they're looking. How does that look from the haul out and having, like, creating new business, which is a good thing for our economy, but how do we staff that?
Right, and I think it's gonna come to wages, excuse me, wages, cost of living, and cost of housing. I would guess, and I don't have any facts on this at all, the reason our unemployment's so low is if you can't afford to live here, you move. You go to a more affordable community, and that's the problem. Is that those wages of $55,900, that's an average, right?
Yeah.
That means there's a lot of people making a whole lot more and a whole lot of people making a lot less. And those folks that are making a lot less, it's just cost burden. I think that 70% cost burden is more close than the 49. And people just give, I know people that have given up and left. And so that's the problem, is how do we, in my mind, is how do we fix that? How do we bring our housing costs down, supply and demand in my opinion, and then how do we bring those basic cost of livings down? That one's tough because I think everybody's working on that, right? So, yeah, it's how do we bring our wages up? How do we? It's an interesting dynamic, and I don't know how to solve it completely.
I realize you're getting the end. I've been enjoying the opportunity to introduce Holly Wolf to some of the folks here, but I wanted to introduce her to the whole group. So Holly Wolf has just joined Search in the last few weeks, and she's our new chief administrator for the Mount Edgecombe Medical Center. We'll be working with Dr. Vastola, who's the medical director there. And so I appreciate you letting me kind of steal a moment to introduce Holly, and I hope that you'll be able to reach out to her and work with her, and we're really excited to have her. She comes to us from a great place, Montana. So,
Welcome.
Well, great. Well, I'm going to finish up. Anybody else have anything dire they want to say? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thanks for the people online, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you everybody for coming. Again, we are hosting these lunches in person, at least for this fall speaker series. Feedback to the chambers. If we like this, don't like this, please give them feedback. Tell your friends to come. The more people who come, the more likely it is that we will do this. An update on our fall speaker series. We are focusing on Sitka's housing and trying to identify solutions, just bring the community together, bring the stakeholders together, and just really have conversations about that issue. So our next lunch is next week, November 8th, and we'll be hearing from Baranof Island Housing Authority. Following that on November 15th, it looks like we have a developers panel. Again, these are all via Zoom if you would like, but we encourage you to come in person. And again, tell your friends.
Thanks, Holly.